The second International AIDS Congress winds up in Paris today. American researchers yesterday reported progress in the treatment of the deadly disease. Scientists say the 2 experimental drug treatments have shown some success, but that more study is needed. Doctors at the Paris conference disagree with the idea of stockpiling one's blood in case it's needed for a transfusion. But Jeannie Mose reports that that idea does have one supporter, the president.
He may not be a doctor, but he is the President of the United States, and despite claims from health officials that the nation's blood supply is basically free from contamination by AIDS, President Reagan suggested Americans start making deposits into their own private accounts at blood banks, saying it can be kept in case they ever need a transfusion. They can get a transfusion of their own blood, and they don't have to gamble. Over at the New York Blood Bank, officials were surprised by the presidential recommendation.
We just don't think, in this organization, we think our blood inventory is safe.
But at the half-dozen or so commercial establishments nationwide that take and store your blood for a fee, the president's advice was greeted with glee.
The reason to have your own personal blood supply is because you have between a 15 and 20% chance of having a problem when you receive blood transfusion from an unrelated stranger.
Unfrozen blood remains good for 42 days, but if you freeze it, as they do here, it can last for years. Dr. Felchu considers it a kind of insurance.
With real life insurance, you actually have to die to collect. With this type of life insurance, actually, you're taking insurance to help save your life.
But banking your own blood isn't cheap. Here at I.D.S Laboratories, it'll cost you $45 for the initial tests and blood-taking procedure. After that, it'll cost $150 a year to store each pint of blood. And though Dr. Felchu says fees for depositing your own blood are covered by health insurance when you use the blood, say for an operation or an accident, Blue Cross Blue Shield says it would not be an acceptable claim. This is one kind of bank where you pay to make a deposit. Jeannie Mose, CNN, New York.
A man in Texas is dead, the victim of an apparent crime of passion. A suspect is in custody after he allegedly shot the boyfriend of his estranged wife yesterday in a Fort Worth courtroom. The suspect was apprehended after firing as many as 3 shots in the court. Investigators now think that a deputy's bullet killed one of 5 hostages during a jewelry store standoff in California. In all, 3 people were killed during that half-day siege in Beverly Hills. A suspect has been charged with killing 2 of the victims. Chuck Condor reports a feeling of dismay has spread across the posh shopping district.
The customers have returned to Rodeo Drive. The chic salons with designer names have all reopened. All, that is, except Van Cleef and Arpels Jewelers, where 3 employees were killed in the aftermath of a 13-and-a-half-hour showdown between police and a lone gunman. Store owners say they have not yet begun to estimate the dollars in sales lost as a result of the hostage incident. Profits were not uppermost on the minds of store owners.
I doubt seriously that anyone thinks, I know certainly we don't, about any sort of loss. What we're concerned about are the people that lost their lives and their families.
It's a famous strait, but a small strait, and the merchants are very tightly connected with each other. And it's right across the street. Very familiar faces. They would come in here occasionally for a cup of coffee or something. So we're really very shocked by all this.
Security-minded store managers say they were shocked that Monday's incident had occurred at Van Cleef and Arpels. Equipped with a sophisticated video surveillance system, bulletproof windows, armed guards, and walls 2 feet thick, Van Cleef and Arpels was considered a fortress.
We have security measures outside, but they had the best. And I feel that they had maybe too good.
But none of those precautions protected employees from a customer who entered the store with a gun and robbery on his mind. The mood in Rodeo Drive's exclusive shops is subdued, but with the return of customers and the ever-present tourists, life is returning to normal here. Even officials for Van Cleef and Arpels say their store will reopen by next week. Chuck Condor, CNN, Beverly Hills, California.
MGM plans to appeal a Los Angeles jury's award of almost $11 million for Raquel Welch. The actress earlier sued the studio and producers of the movie Cannery Row, claiming that she was improperly dismissed from the film. All's nice on Miami Vice again. Don Johnson has returned to the set, ending his 1-week holdout for more money. Johnson won't tell reporters how much in the dispute it was worth, saying only he'd been in Europe. Producers reportedly considered replacing Johnson with actor Mark Harmon. Capitol Hill has its own share of macho men, and they have the black belts to prove it. David French learned that some congressmen are anything but karate kids.
Move over, Filibuster Fred and Roberta Roll Call. Make room for Karate Congressman. In ceremonies of almost Olympic scale, Taekwondo Karate Grandmaster Jun Rhee tested the congressman for top grade in the martial art, black belt. Republican Toby Roth of Wisconsin, retired Missouri Democrat Richard Icord, Republican Bob Livingston of Louisiana, and Florida Democrat Bill Chappell first sparred with champions of the sport, then with each other. At halftime, Taekwondo students put on a demonstration. Then came the only thing remaining in the way of a black belt, the board break, 2 boards back to back. For Roth, the order was to break 2 one-inch boards with a hand chop. Icord, the foot. Livingston, knuckle punch. Chappell, the elbow strike. For all 4, breakthrough of the non-legislative kind. With the presentation of black belt certificate and flowers, America had its first black belt congressman.
It gives you self-confidence. Hopefully, I won't need it, but it does make me feel good that I'm able to take care of myself if I do meet a challenging situation.
We asked the Grand Master what it's like to hit a congressman on the head.
We feel bad when we hit, but we don't do intentionally. You know, I have my personal definition of perfection. Perfection is you never make mistakes unknowingly.
Not a bad lesson for a congressman or anyone else. David French, CNN, Capitol Hill.
More news after this. It's 19 minutes past the hour. Time for Headline Sports.
Mark Mackay, Headline Sports. The Mets have all of a sudden fallen upon hard times. For the second night in a row, the leaders in the National League East lost to the second-place team in that division. Montreal beat up New York 6-2 at Shea Stadium, thus reducing the Mets' lead to 8 games. Mike Fitzgerald, Mitch Webster, and Tim Wallach each accounted for a pair of runs. Out west, the Giants are still clinging to a half-game lead despite being shut out by the San Diego Padres Tuesday night. San Diego's Eric Shaw combined with a pair of relief pitchers to throw a 4-hitter. In the Astrodome, Houston doubled up Cincinnati 8-4. Ace Nolan Ryan came off the DL and picked up his first win since late April. Glenn Davis helped out offensively by smacking a 2-run homer. Elsewhere, the Phillies edged the Cubs in extra innings. St. Louis down Pittsburgh, and the LA Dodgers beat up the Atlanta Braves 6-2. In the American League, the East-leading Boston Red Sox have lost 3 straight. For the second consecutive night, New York bombed the Bo Sox. This time, 8-1 was the final. Ron Hassey went 4 for 4 in the night, including a home run. California is now tied with Texas for the lead in the West. On Tuesday, the Angels blew out the Rangers 12-3. Rob Wilfong drove in 4 runs, including a bases-loaded double in a 6-run 3rd inning. Elsewhere, the A's over the Royals 8-4. Orioles edged the Tigers in 10. Toronto shut out the Brewers. Minnesota stopped Chicago. And the Mariners beat the Indians 8-7. There's already been one major upset at the Wimbledon Tennis Championships. For the first time in 14 years, Jimmy Connors lost in the opening round of a Grand Slam event. On Tuesday, Connors was bumped by Robert Seguso 6-3, 3-6, 7-6, and 7-6. Mark Mackay, Headline Sports.
This is Sandy Kenyon with the Hollywood Minute. Out of Africa, winner of the Oscar for Best Picture last year, will be available on video cassette this fall. MCA Home Video has announced a September 11th release date for that film. Jim Belushi, who's been getting good reviews for his role in About Last Night, has been added to the cast of Dragnet. Columnist Army Archerd reports Belushi will co-star with Dan Aykroyd in the comedy, who'll be playing Joe Friday. The role originated by Jack Webb. Cannon Films plans to produce a TV series based on the movie Delta Force. It starred Chuck Norris and Lee Marvin, but neither of the 2 actors will be in the series. However, Norris can be heard in a syndicated cartoon show this fall, Chuck Norris's Karate Commandos. This is Sandy Kenyon with the Hollywood Minute.
In the headlines, investigators in Seattle are warning people not to take any non-prescription medicines in capsule form. Cyanide was found yesterday in a bottle of Anacin 3 capsules, and 2 recent deaths have been linked to poisoned Excedrin capsules. Tropical storm Bonnie is several hundred miles off the coast of Texas, but it's gathering strength. Forecasters say they may issue a hurricane watch or warning later today. And the House finally votes today on President Reagan's plan to give $100 million in aid to rebels fighting Nicaragua's Sandinista government. With the headlines, I'm Mike Summers. The news continues. In dollars and cents, all Nippon Airways is set to begin service to 2 U.S. cities. That's motivated Japan Airlines to expand its destinations in the U.S. Mark Dolmage reports.
Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland.
When Japan Airlines won the right to begin direct flights to Atlanta, Georgia from Tokyo, the publicity department thought it'd be a good idea to have a few Southern belles brought over to help promote the new route. Some 2 million tourists from Japan are expected to visit the United States this year, but the American Southland is rarely their destination. The twice-weekly flights to Georgia, beginning July 2nd, are aimed at changing some habits.
We can offer them a sense of the Old South, the romanticism that goes along with that, the antebellum homes, the sort of Gone with the Wind flavor of the Old South.
And if Gone with the Wind and Pretty Girls won't work, JAL is certain that in this nation of weekend golfers, Jack Nicklaus will.
Nice flight.
Japan Airlines, for the first time in its history, now will have competition from a Japanese carrier on its overseas routes. The privatization of JAL is allowing ANA, All Nippon Airways, to begin overseas flights to Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles early next month.
Konnichiwa. On July 16th, Japan's favorite airline begins non-stop service to Tokyo.
ANA will have 5 flights a week to the United States, and officials are confident they will have at least between 50 and 70% of the seats sold at takeoff. Mark Dolmage, CNN, Tokyo.
The horror of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre will be back on the big screen soon. Leatherface is back, and like a true man of the 80s, he's chasing yuppies and catching them. Tony Clark reports.
And action!
The terror returns, this time in the netherworld of Christmas lights, bodies and bones, the home of the Chainsaw family.
Okay, go!
The victims in the second installment of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre are the well-to-do kids of the 80s, yuppies.
And cut.
Screenwriter Kit Carson picked his targets while Christmas shopping last year.
I was standing there watching these people run by me in these crinkly pastel colors and stacking up clothes, and I said, these people need a chainsaw after them.
And that's just what happened. There are bodies and bones everywhere. These ghoulish goodies are the work of special effects director Tom Savini, the creator of the effects for the Friday the 13th and the Day of the Dead films.
We've got some foam packaging bits that we dyed red, just look like brains, and we sealed it in there, and that's going to be in there for like another week and a half before we hit it with a chainsaw.
It's been 12 years since director Tobe Hooper made his first chainsaw movie. That one was done on a budget of $160,000. This one is budgeted at $4.6 million.
Chainsaw 1, we only had one chainsaw. When the chainsaw broke, we wrapped it for the day and got the chainsaw fixed.
Leatherface is back with his mask made from the skin of his victims. In Chainsaw 2, he faces his toughest rival, a former Texas Ranger who packs chainsaws of his own.
You see, these people, they killed my entire family, made chili out of them in the last picture. So I've been tracking them for 14 years now. And I'm going to get these mad dogs.
Audiences around the country will be able to see if he does late this summer in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Tony Clark, CNN, Austin, Texas.
This is Headline News.